Welcome back to the SDG Warriors Podcast. I'm Sumar Mohanty, the team lead and student coordinator at the SDG Warriors. We are a team of passionate student change makers and STEMnists dedicated to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, leveraging the power of STEM education and 21st century skills. Powered by Powered by all of these things, we have brought you the SDG Warriors podcast, which brings out inspiring stories from edu heroes and STEM experts from around the world. Ideal for students, teachers, parents, and anyone interested in STEM education and social impact. This podcast aims to provide enriching learning experiences and drive positive change in local, global, and digital communities. And to borrow from Sondheim, bit by bit, putting it together, Barry Joseph's back for Act 2 because some stories they deserve a little more fizz. It turns out that one conversation wasn't enough to contain all the sparkle and educational wisdom that he brings to the table. And last week's chat was such a soda light that needed a refill. So we are diving back in to get to know the carbonated core of his work. And for those who don't know, I'll just give a brief introduction. Barry Joseph is a true pioneer in combining play and games for social impact. He's the co founder for Games for Change, and he has designed amazing games, award winning educational titles like Ayiti, The Cost of Life, and Hurricane Katrina Tempest in Crescent City. And with over 25 years of experience, he has led innovative digital learning initiatives like places like the American Museum of Natural History and designed apps for the Girl Scouts of the USA. He's also co founded the Brooklyn Seltzer Museum, celebrating history through playful, immersive storytelling. He's an accomplished author, and his newly launched book, Matching Minds with Sondheim, explores the masters, puzzles, and games. Welcome back, Barry.
Thank you so much, Simmer. It's so great to be back here. Last week was so much fun. I can't wait to see where you lead us today.
Yes, and well, I do remember last week when we met, October had just begun. So, how has October been treating you so far? And like to help our listeners audibly visualize the entire experience, can you tell us where are you right now? What's the weather like outside? And what can you see from your window?
So, just like last week, it's warm here in New York. That means kind of mid 70s, but it's starting to get a little bit colder. So, it rained today. The rain is gone now, and I see little puffy white clouds in the blue sky going by. And just as in last week, I can see New York City. I'm in Queens. So, when I say New York City, I'm talking about Manhattan. So, I can see both downtown and midtown Manhattan, like the Empire State Building. And I've had a great week because my book came out last week, which was awesome.
That's wonderful, Barry. And congratulations on the new book. Like knowing your background, it sounds like an absolute treasure hunt for our theater fans. And back home here in Bangalore, India, it's well past midnight. It's 1 a.m. And that's basically fine because I was doing my network analysis homework, which is basically math with circuits. So it's a real brain twister. And since it's late at night, the usual infamous traffic of Bangalore, you cannot hear it at all, which is like, and you can hear this weird, rare, and calming silence, which feels almost strange after the day's notorious bustle. The weather is calm and chill, and it's perfect for today's conversation. And yes, October, it's been all about exams. It's been all about surprise tests and festivals. But that's life, isn't it? And honestly, as a society, we've come a long way towards reaching this sort of fast-paced normalcy again, especially after COVID. So let's take a time machine and rewind a little to that era. Barry, reflecting on your work creating Girl Scouts at home during COVID 19 and your 2022 book, Friday is Tomorrow or the Dayenu Year, how did witnessing and documenting children's and communities' adaptations to unprecedented disruption shape your understanding of resilience, collective learning, and the ways that digital and narrative experiences can foster emotional well being and equitable opportunity in times of crisis?
Whew, that's a topic for a whole hour. That's a great question that's going to take me a bit to unpack. So, you asked me about the website that we created at Girl Scouts when suddenly no one could meet in person. And then the book I wrote about the first year experiencing the shutdown here in New York City. Girl Scouts, for those who don't know, in America is about 400,000 girls, maybe another. no, excuse me, 4 million girls, 400,000 volunteer adults who are running those troops in over 100 different organized communities around the country. And almost all of the funds for Girl Scouts comes from selling cookies in spring. And in the middle of that cookie season, everything shut down. Girls couldn't go out in public and sell cookies, especially here in New York City when it first hit. And so we went from supporting young people, young girls specifically, to take on leadership skills and engaging in their community in person, to having to figure out what does it mean to be a Girl Scout when they can't leave their own homes. And it's all based on getting together as a group. It's based on being connected to their community. And I had my own troop at the time as well. My youngest was in a troop, and we had a number of girls who were having to stop selling the cookies and figure out what were they going to do. And at Girl Scouts itself, I worked at the National here in New York City. We had to figure out what resources we could provide. So we started figuring out Girl Scouts at Home, a website that troop leaders, the parents, and the girls themselves could use to keep pursuing the same goals that they were pursuing in person in Girl Scouts, and to figure out what could the internet support to keep them connected with each other. This was the early days when people were discovering Zoom for the first time, as well as Zoom fatigue. When many students couldn't go to school, schools were closed, and they were told they were going to open in a week or a month, and then they weren't going to open at all until maybe the next year. And so we were dealing with all those disappointments, and we were in the middle of one of those things that we were trying to provide to give them resilience and to build resilience, to keep them connected with each other, keep them connected with the community, keep them connected with their own identity as a young leader in their community who could have an impact. I remember while we couldn't finish selling all of our cookies, we still had money from what we sold. And so the girls had to decide what they wanted to do with those funds. And some of it went back to support Girl Scouts here locally, and some went to support the Black Lives Matter movement, which was new at the time. I think it was a global fund. And that was what they were valuing at the time, that they thought was important, that their hard work selling cookies should then support. And then Fridays Tomorrow is the name of a book that I came up with, adapting my diaries that I created for a local research project. I was one of 120 people who were selected to be just like regular, average, everyday New Yorkers who were going to, record our experiences for a year. That would then go into this archive so that researchers could come back and just get a sense of what was it like for New Yorkers at this time. And for those who don't know Hebrew, or don't know what Dayenu means, Dayenu is a word that's often used during Passover, which is during the Passover Seder in the spring, where we're talking about and recounting the story as a story of Jews leaving Egypt and getting free from oppression, and all of the steps that God did to help that move forward. And each step was one step closer towards liberation. And after each step, we say Dayenu, meaning if only that had happened, we would be appreciative. And the reality is, no, we would have still been stuck in an oppressive slave situation. It actually wouldn't have been okay. But when you get to the end, looking back, that's when you can say Dayenu. And so I use that concept of Dayenu Year because my wife used it to help us understand one of our Passovers during COVID, of saying that, like, why do we say Dayenu when it really wouldn't be enough? That's only something you can say once you're safe. And now we are safe. We're free from that oppression. And we were getting to that point of COVID. And so the book ends at the point when we have vaccines that we can finally take. We can finally get outside of our bubble. We can finally start socializing again and go out and be in public again. And so that concept Dayenu Year was talking about that there were so many things we needed to get to that point. But it was only once we got to the end that we can really appreciate going back and looking at all those steps. I'm not sure I answered the question, but that was explaining the two things that were in the reference in the beginning. But one of the things that I learned was how important resilience was for times like this. And one of the things I learned that builds resilience is from research is that young people getting to hear stories from their family about their struggles when they were younger, especially from their grandparents. Hearing those stories for me as a parent could be upsetting to have, my mother-in-law tell stories about surviving the Holocaust, talking to my, 11-year-old. That's a little bit uncomfortable. But it turns out that hearing those stories from someone who is alive and well in front of them, tells them that even the worst things can be overcome, that they've known people in their lives who've been able to do that. And so part of the way that we build resilience is sharing the places where we've had to overcome our own obstacles. So I'm hoping writing that book will help my children and any children they might have in the future be able to see where one of their relatives had to face something and how they overcame it.
And I think that's a really powerful reflection, Barry. I recall when I was just entering ninth grade, it was when the pandemic hit, and like the sudden collapse of school, sports, and like everyday routines, it forced me and my peers to confront like resilience head on. And what I learned echoes so much with what you documented. Resilience is never a solo act. You're supported by your parents, you're supported by your grandparents, and also your friends. It's collective, it's digitally mediated creativity, you can call it that. And just like Girl Scouts, like they turned their online impact into a lifeline. I remember me and my classmates, we used to have collaborative video projects and music and lots of shared memes as a survival kit. And that wasn't like something extra, it was something which rebuilt our community in the absence of official structures. But then there's also a hard lesson which we got to learn that time, that resilience was uneven. Those without reliable internet connections or devices, they were excluded from the very tools of learning and emotional well-being. And that actually showed me that equity in this sort of crisis, it's like in these digital lifelines, um, it it's important to see that accessibility matters. And for my generation, like we have grown up in devices only, Gen Z, and resilience that has become synonymous with digital connection and collective improvisation. And there's like this big ethical responsibility that lies in our hands, that we must design technology and community spaces to ensure that no one is left behind when such a disruption inevitably returns. And looking at such a future from an ethical lens, as a game designer using AI in Uncanny Valley, how do you reconcile the technical possibilities of AI art with the ethics of authorship, labor, and attribution? And like, what cultural or ethical blind spots do you fear are already baked into AI design? And how might games be one of those few spaces where society can just, resisting them?
Well, first, I want to say I appreciate that you spelled Uncanny Valley correct. If you can go back to QA, and if you can put that on the screen, because
Yes.
there's three N's in the middle, which is a little bit off, which is the whole point. It's understanding that Uncanny Valley, that awkwardness that exists between how we actually understand the way the world is and how the AI represents its own understanding of the world back to us. And that gap between the two is not only uncanny, it makes us feel awkward. It's also the key to understanding the difference between the way we create and put things out in the world and identifying when someone does that and pretends to it to be theirs, but actually it's just being produced through AI. And so part of what I did with this game Uncanny Valley, which is a card game, is reproduce art using AI tools 2 years ago using Midjourney at the time, without making any edits whatsoever. Now, I made decisions about where I wanted the images to go and which ones had more of the uncanny aspects in it or not. But once those decisions were made, whatever it produced, I never edited any of it. So you're looking at like a completely AI produced image guided by me, but produced by AI. And the game then actually has a number of different mechanics. So there's many ways to play it, but they're all different ways of teaching people a digital literacy for how to look at AI and how to think about how we feel about the issues you're asking right here. But as you can see, embedded in the name itself, the place where there's something off or something's wrong, and being able to explore that, whether it's in general thinking about how mass produced language is going to be used to fill the web with false content, to sway people politically in one direction or another, or interfere in other countries, where it's about images being created and videos that are fake with deep fakes and being able to identify those. And there's all sorts of fun and interesting things one can do with them. But when we can't prove where they come from, and it makes us stop being able to trust what we see, we need to develop a different type of visual literacy and a different way to think critically about what we're consuming, how we're consuming it, and how we're sharing it with others, and how we're commenting on it with others, to be able to still be able to inform ourselves about things that we care about in the world, things we want to know about, and especially things we want to engage with, to have an impact around. So that's one way of thinking about this. The ethics of authorship and labor and attribution, super, super challenging. I support the tools, that are trying to figure out how to embed meta content that would stay fixed with it, so that some of that authorship and history will be maintained. But I think it's a losing battle. I'm concerned that, as we say, the horse is out of the barn and we can't put it back in. And we just have to deal with the fact that we've degraded our ability to trust what we see. Maybe we never could, but we thought we could. And we have to figure out other ways to understand how to think about what evidence is, how to think about what it means to use these tools that are super powerful and can really enhance us and give us superpowers in many ways, but pull from labor that's unpaid for. And what does it mean for other tools that are more ethical, or more ethical tools that can be developed? I haven't fully resolved those struggles for myself, but I use AI all the time to support me, to write better, to think more critically, to do work faster that I otherwise couldn't do. And I try and keep in mind that there are, to answer the last piece here, all sorts of biases that are baked in depending on where the information came from. And that, when I first started doing images in Midjourney, everyone was always white. And if I asked for anyone of color, it was also like going too far on the other side. Like, it didn't know how to actually represent people because that wasn't the pool of information that it was coming from. So just becoming conscious of how these things, these data sets are biased, and what happens when we are not being informed by our use of AI, but letting it lead us, and that being informed by how dangerous that is. And so we also always have to be asking ourselves, where's this information coming from? Where are the biases? And how do I make sure I'm the final one making the critical decision?
Absolutely, Mr. Joseph. And Uncanny Valley, it's been created with Mid Journey, and it shows that even the most powerful tools, they can carry such huge responsibilities. By framing the card game around human AI collaboration, it like elevates creativity beyond just the normal output. The Uncanny Valley aesthetic, like the strange mix of familiarity and the imperfection, it constantly nudges the players to consider the human choices and like the styles which is embedded inside AI generated work. And then as an engineering undergrad, I think it's definitely something to think about, the irony to be to see that we are being trained to optimize for speed and efficiency, yet here the most meaningful design, it comes from slowing down, from reflecting, from resolving each
Hmm.
and every bias that we encounter. We must remember about the human element of all of these things. And the games become like safe and a hands-on space to explore such ethical and creative origins of technology, proving like that the next meaningful design, it is framed by thoughtful engagement and not only speed or volume. But again, there's another kind of irony which makes me wonder. Museums have always been our culture's hard drives, safeguarding the memory of what actually happened. But now we have AI that can, generate convincing simulations and creative narratives that evoke the real. So, like for example, in my own MUNs, like we are taught to anchor our arguments in primary sources. But I can now ask AI to write a completely hypothetical but very believable diary entry from a war soldier. And given AI's power to be so beautifully blur the lines between reality and simulation, how can cultural institutions ethically use this technology without undermining their core mission to preserve and present authentic memory?
Well, so I think what you described is very true. The ability to look at the original is part of the value of, and giving people access to it, whether it's as researchers or to walk into a hall and just see it on a wall or in a box, is part of the power and importance of cultural institutions. I don't think we should ever be using AI to, simulate what that is and present it as real. Now, if I can't get into a museum and I can't get to, say, the Colosseum, but at home I can put on a VR gear and pretend to walk around it, I think that's fine. In fact, that's valuable and powerful. But I'm never going to pretend that I'm actually there, right? So, and no museum is actually looking to do that per se, right? But technologies can do incredible things, using tools to scan ancient sites to create 3D models, and use those 3D models that you can perhaps visually explore through a tablet inside a museum, or use it with textures to create a 3D model that you can explore through VR, or create a video that moves through it. and maybe then suggest artistically what it might have looked like back in the day before it was a ruin. Those are valuable ways to help us look at the past and experience it in new ways, but never pretending that it is actually original. The original is always the most powerful source for itself, right? So when the original is primary, then the question is, so what can AI do to enhance it? And so what AI can do in part, I think, is to help us scale up resources. How can tools exist to help me know what is that original object and what might be relevant for me to know about? When you go to most museums, there's one wall copy and it says one thing for one audience. And if that speaks to you, and if you have the literacy to understand how to interpret it, then you're going to get some meaning from that object. But for many people, it won't speak to them, or even if it did, they don't have the literacy to understand the type of language and syntax that might be used, and so again they're left without a connection. So this is in general a question for digital technology. How can it create new pathways for people and different types of learners and different types of backgrounds to be able to create their own connections with objects in the museum and then whatever that history is about? Can AI then be part of those tool sets? And I think that's very interesting to watch. Other people have used AI to create some of, like, I think there was a museum that had wallpaper, and then used the AI to spread the wallpaper out and expand it across the whole wall for the background of the scene, and that was interesting. And really, we're just in a period of experimentation. So everyone is doing everything that I've seen is kind of writing about it, thinking these very critical questions, and then posing them as experiments, so that we can all be learning together. And I think that's the most important thing right now. We should be critical about AI tools, but we should be exploring them and doing them in a very visible way.
Absolutely. And it's not about forcing the AI tool, just because AI is everywhere, you don't need to put it in each and every place. It also circles back to our conversation about accessibility, right? So people who are not able to visit the museums, they can go to the museums virtually. And I think Google Arts and Culture, they're doing some amazing work with it. So if our listeners, they haven't explored it, go and check out the paintings, go and check out the different historical places which have been captured by Google Arts and Culture. It's truly fascinating. And honestly, all this, it makes me think about how we verify claims about ourselves as well. The idea of authenticity, it connects directly to how we represent learning itself. Digital badges were supposed to be these portable, trustworthy proofs of skill, a kind of living resume. But now we see them everywhere. People are doing courses, they're taking online courses now, often just for the incentive that we get a certificate or a badge at the end. And participation alone has become its own credentials. So as a student, I find myself constantly trying to translate real experiences into real stories. So I had a question that, one second,
Micro
one
credentials, micro credentials.
I think okay, I'm back. My net was fluctuating a bit. So, from your experience designing digital badging systems, what evidence matters most to institutions and employers, and how should designers avoid turning badges into just mere gamified decorations?
So let's talk about the ways that we learn and the ways that we can demonstrate that learning to others. 20 years ago, a number of people came together who recognized that the traditional way that the school system recognizes learning by standardizing it through grades was a really poor mechanism for really communicating what any particular individual young person knew and what they might be able to provide, both in a college or in a workplace setting. That it's all designed to be standardized. And when you do that, all the details disappear. And for an organization like the MacArthur Foundation, which has spent, I'm going to guess, hundreds of millions of dollars over many decades trying to improve education in the country, they started seeing the impact that digital learning was having outside those formalized spaces through playing video games, through going to websites where you can learn all sorts of technical skills and access digital tools, through after school environments like the Girl Scouts that we were just talking about that are explicitly developing leadership skills. How could one demonstrate what they knew? And how could they do it in a way that could be standardized so that systems could plug into it, potential employers, people with offering internships, scholarships, college recruitment people, without losing those details. So in other words, rather than the formal learning being the only type of information that was valued in the economic exchange of who you are and what your values are, how could your informal learning have a chance to play there as well? And so people looked at what was happening in video games 20 years ago and saw how badges in games were not only being used to motivate learners to say this is what you can learn next or achieve next in the game, but then show that back and have have a social currency around that badge. And so I started thinking about how that could be a model in the education system. And now 20 years later, you see it in many, many areas. You see it as, I'm off my job right now, or I'm doing certain things in school, but it's something I'm not taking a class in, but I can sign up and do a boot camp, or I can do something online that will give me a micro credential in a way that can be verified and is valid. It demonstrates not that I was told something or that I sat in a seat for a certain amount of time, but that I had to have done something. And that means I have a skill and it can reflect that for me. And so I think there's a lot that we still need to do to improve the ecosystem of micro credentials, of helping people understand the value and what they mean, and really making sure we can achieve that goal that was there from the beginning. How do we help young people be in charge of what they're learning, how they're learning, and how they can demonstrate the value of that learning? 20 years ago, a young person wouldn't go into most settings and say, oh, here's the skills I want to tell you about that I learned through playing video games. That was completely disrespected, looked down upon. It would be seen as ridiculous. It wasn't even clear that most young people would have the language to even talk about it because there was no one modeling that. Nowadays, you can read books, watch movies, you can watch people online talking about all those things. And there are people who are explicitly creating game experiences as a test for you when you come in. That's becoming not the norm, but more normative in some environments. So I think what we're seeing here in part was an attempt to completely disrupt the system of how who was in charge of your learning as a young person and what you were allowed to share that represented that learning. And now we're 20 years in, it's time to disrupt that system again and figure out how to do it even better and figure out what's missing. And if we can't do it through micro credentials, what do we need to look to next?
And I think that's a very important point, Barry. Evidence is what gives credential its weight. And again, we circle back to the point of storytelling as well. It's We don't need to make badges as merely icons, but it contains the entire story. And it's more than just a proof of purchase or a check mark for completion. We need to start treating these badges as a vessel, something which holds all your struggles, which holds all the different obstacles that you had to overcome. And again, digital badge, for example, I have a digital badge from an online leadership course, which I really don't mention anywhere except where it's required, because it's just a receipt. It just proves that I sat through all the modules, but it
Mhm.
says nothing about me as a person, how I struggle or what I actually learned. Whereas when I reflect back on the courses that I did in Adobe's Educators Exchange, I don't remember exactly how the courses are now. Maybe I need to retake them. So in that, we had to create these little projects after each and every course. We had to document what we learned, what things we are still confused about, and what things we would like to explore, what things didn't work, what things worked. And that actually gives us an insight into reflection. Those are the things which matters. Or even while leading the SDG Warriors, the stories, the fights that we have while choosing the perfect questions, while framing the questions, and the final product which we put out for our listeners. Those are the things which matters. And again, while we don't have an official badge, these are the real credentials. The project plans, the team debating, the final outcomes, the feedback from the community itself, it's the entire narrative. A reflection, a key, an artifact, a peer's testimony. It actually transforms like a small static token into like a seed for growth. And that's how we can actually move beyond gamification and start genuinely representing learning. And on that note, we're in the sparkling crescendo now. Let's pop the cap, shake the scene, and let ideas fizz and fly. Mr. Barry, are you ready to waltz through an absolutely effervescent rapid fire round?
I'm ready, Simmer, but please call me Barry.
Barry, let's go! Question up on your screen. A seltzer bubble is silence before the pop, just like a pause in the Sondheim song before the orchestra erupts. So, if you could design a performance where every bubble released a sound, a note, a story, a memory, what symphony would rise from a single glass of seltzer?
I love that. So every bubble that comes up bursts and shares a nostalgic story of someone talking about something they associated in a positive way with seltzer in their life. First bubble pops up, and someone talks about spraying their sibling with a seltzer siphon when they were a kid. And then the bubble bursts, and someone talks about how funny it was watching with their dad, the Three Stooges, when they were spraying each other with seltzer siphons. Then another one pops, and they're talking about the drinks they used to make with their mom, mixing it with chocolate and syrup and milk to make an egg cream, and then boop, it pops again, and people are talking about how it really helped them whenever they had an upset stomach, and it would settle their stomach and pop. And all these things keep coming up, and it doesn't matter what they're saying; they're all having this wonderful glow in the tone of their voice that's coming up through the bubble of remembering something from the past that they're trying to hold on to.
That's so interesting. And honestly, I can remember the movie Inside Out, in which we had these memory balls. Instead of those, imagine if those were the seltzer bubbles that you just described. And they, when they burst after each and every note, after the rise in a jazz orchestra, like when it bursts, a there's like a sudden pop of orange glitter, which represents the life of a showman or the life of a showgirl. Swifties, if you know, you know. And speaking of that, if Stephen Sondheim were to write a full on musical of your life, Barry, what would the opening number sound like, and which of your projects would become the Act 1 finale?
If Sondheim were to write it, holy cow! What would Sondheim want to talk about me? What would the opening number sound like? It would be very accessible. It would be probably a song in the style of an older song, intentionally. That's a style of song he'd like to write a lot. Uh, I'm trying to think where you would structure the story of my life from. Um, I feel like it might be wanting to go inside, not our world, but the world of something I made and beginning in that space. Like maybe one of the pictures in Uncanny Valley, for example, or one of the characters in Ayiti, The Cost of Life. Like starting with one of the things I've been part of producing and creating and seeing me from their perspective and their relationship with me. So maybe that's it. Maybe the opening number is all these different characters from all these different, worlds I've created, from digital games and virtual games and VR experiences, and the ways I've used digital tools to help people capture their lives and tell the stories about what's important to them about their lives and what's happening in the world. And they're all coming together for this crazy, cacophonous opening number.
Yes, and as the opening number bounces with its clever rhythms and playful twists, setting the stage for your journey, just like we stepped into the gaming universe, let's bring the gaming universe into our world. For unleashing ultimate chaos, if MicroRangers escaped the museum and shrank down to a microbial state, and Brooklyn itself was one giant fizzy egg cream, what hidden city would discover swirling between chocolate syrup rivers, soda bubble geysers, and crumb strewn streets?
Simmer, I just want to keep hearing you describe it. It sounds great.
I mean, I think every corner it would hide like a tiny adventure, like you have the Brooklyn Bridge, it'll be arching over the chocolate river, and then maybe there'll be Willy Wonka as well. He'll be sprinting ahead, and while the Micro Rangers they'll be running, they'll pull off like a full-on Brooklyn Nine-Nine style chase. So yes, an ultimate crossover. That's how I imagine it.
Sign me up for that. I love it.
Awesome. And wait, how would you describe it?
I don't think I can do better than what you just did, Simmer.
Okay, well, it's definitely a world that we would need to step into. And that was an absolute thrill, Barry. It's been incredible to dive into your world, your tightly woven lyrical puzzles of Sondheim, into the decentralized history which is hidden into a seltzer siphon. So as we cap off the episode, let's bottle up everything that we have learned today using our final segment, the Inspire segment. So, Barry, who or what has been your biggest inspiration in life and why? And I see a Minecraft figurine. I love that.
This is my son's when he was 6.
It's lovely. I would
This
love
is
to have such a figurine.
Who's been your biggest inspiration in life and why? Well, right now I
Yes.
have to say, my family, my 2 children and my wife, and how they support me to do all these crazy different direction ways of supporting young people and helping people engage the world through digital media and cultural spaces and creating communities, and what they've taught me about the decisions they've made about who they want to be in the world, and um, the things that they want to put their time in, like Minecraft, for example, and what they want to build in those spaces. And that's the first thing that comes to mind in the last few decades. But I want to think about growing up. Growing up, I was most inspired by people who were thinking outside the box. I was 7 years old when the first Choose Your Own Adventure book came out. Um, that said, if you want to go up the ladder, go turn to page 12. But if you want to go into the cave, go to page 32. And that was a book which I wasn't aware of at the time, was amazing for me because it gave me agency. It showed me a different way to interact with a book. It showed me what it could be like to be in charge. And it was also different from any other book that existed at the time. And yet could live within that ecosystem, be sold by the same people who sold them, and sit on the shelf with all the others. And as a young person, all of those different types of creators who were working in spaces that were giving me agency as a young person and showing me the possibilities of media that I can not only consume but also create, taught me that stories weren't just something to absorb. It was I got to be learn from them so I can learn how to tell my own, and figure out how to use the tools that were around me. And starting as a young person, I started getting onto BBSs and coding when I was 12 years old in the early 80s. And it prepared me for a lifetime of looking at all the new digital tools that kept coming out. Like we're talking about AI is one of the most recent ones, and thinking about what could they do for me to improve who I am, what are the dangers that we need to avoid, and how can they be used for education to help other people expand their voices and the powers they can have in the world to make a difference. So all of those people, like the ones who created Choose Your Own Adventures, and then the early, text-based adventures on my computer system, and then games on my television, all of those people, and D&D, Gary Gygax, for role-playing games, all of those gave me a different framework than I was taught in formal education about how to find a space for myself in the world.
That's a beautiful answer, Barry. Whether the inspiration it comes from a book or the people that surround you or the people who were around you when you were growing up, it's definitely, it's shaped your unique approach towards blending curiosity with action, and definitely agency at a young age. It matters a lot and it lasts a lifetime. So, Barry, what words of inspiration were given to you that you would like to pass along to others?
Hmm. Well, since I just wrote the book on Stephen Sondheim, and I appreciated you making ever lovely puns to some of his songs, from Into the Woods, in the song in No One Is Alone, there's a line, someone is on your side. And I use that when I end my podcast, because I say, someone is on your side, especially when matching minds with Sondheim. Because Sondheim, in his work, whether on the stage or in his puzzles and games, has our back. And that's part of why I think people love his shows and why I love his puzzles and games. He sees us, and he's there to help us see each other, see ourselves, and see the world in a new way. And that idea of remembering always that someone is on your side, whether or not you can tell, is irrelevant. It's always true. And our job is just to look for the evidence that it's to remember that, and then look for the examples around us, and then expect that from folks. Expect people to be there for us, and give them the opportunities to step up for us when we need them.
Absolutely. Someone will be on our side no matter what happens, no matter if we feel that the world is completely closing in on us, someone will be on our side. An amazing gem for our listeners today. And finally, could you give the next generation of change makers a call to action? What can we children and young people do to make the world a better place?
Well, one, don't wait. You're doing it now. You're not leaders of the future. You're leaders now. And so to be effective leaders now, learn about the things that you want to know about, dig deep, do the research, think critically about your sources, go to trusted sources, talk to adults, find the adults who will listen to you, build community, become parts of communities. If you can't find, build a community. And if you can't find the community you need, build your own. If you are finding systems that are not doing what you need them to do, build those systems or challenge other systems to adapt to become them, and teach us. Expect to teach us. Learn from us, but teach us at the end of the day, because we're gonna have to do it together. And while we're leaving behind what will be your future, you'll be leading us all in the present.
Absolutely. And as Sondheim reminds us, I'm not afraid of anything except not trying. Try everything. For the next generation of change makers, that means taking bold action, building your own communities, and creating your own world using your own superpowers, experimenting and leading change. When even when it feels daunting, remember someone will be on your side. Barry, I couldn't be happier to have such a meaningful discussion today. In our two-part conversation, you have given us a powerful set of principles that connects everything from the digital frontier of the 90s to AI revolution of today. You have taught us whether it's balancing empathy and mechanics in a game like Tempest in Crescent City, or designing digital badges. The goal is to honor the authentic story of human experiences. You've shown us whether we are stepping into the role of a scientist in crime scene Neanderthal or interrogating AI generated images. Our mission is to build capacity for both critical verification and genuine wonder. Knowing the correct sources is the skill for the future. Fact checking is a skill for the future. And above all, the Seltzer Museum to Sondheim's puzzles, you have proven that the most powerful systems for learning are often hidden in the things that we think are just for play. So, that, folks, is the power of play. Thank you so much, Barry, for taking out the time and joining us again for this enriching conversation.
My pleasure, Simmer. Thank you so much for
And to
having
our
me.
listeners, yes, learn, connect, and imagine new possibilities. You can explore the links in our show notes to see how Barry puts all of this into practice. And Barry, can you tell a little more to our listeners about your new book?
Oh, sure. Matching Minds with Sondheim is in one part a biography of Stephen Sondheim, one of the greatest creative minds of the 20th century, but it's a ludological biography, meaning ludology, the study of play. It's looking at his life from the perspective of play, how he liked to play with people, how he created tools and resources through games and puzzles, and how he specifically used puzzles to design moments of clarity and create moments of connection for the people he loved in his life. And it's also a collection of resources. It tells you how you can play your own Sondheim games. It tells you how you can design your own puzzles like Sondheim. So whether you know Sondheim or not, whether you know how to design puzzles or not, it welcomes everyone into that space equally, and introduces you to both this creative mind and a new way to understand him, and a new way to think about how to understand people and perhaps yourself.
And if that has sparked your curiosity, I highly recommend picking up Matching Minds with Sondheim to explore the magic that happens when art and play intersect, along with games. And continuing that journey from the Broadway stage to the animation screen, stay tuned for our next episode releasing this Friday, where we are taking you inside the world of imagination and innovation at Walt Disney Animation Studios. To deepen your knowledge of everything STEM, sustainability, and education, subscribe to the SDG Warriors podcast for in depth discussions and meaningful conversations with real world EDUheroes and changemakers like Barry. And if you love this episode, help others discover it by leaving a review and sharing it with your friends, teachers, and most importantly, your family. Remember to stay curious and be the change. Until next time, it's bye from the SDG Warriors.